What's up guys, welcome back to more Reddit stories about Karens, crazy people, and all that kind of stuff. As usual, we got some more Reddit posts to check out today, so be sure to share your thoughts about today's stories down in the comments and let's get right into it. Entitled Landlord Forged My Husband's Signature on a Contract. Posting mainly to vent before I lose my marbles completely. For a while now, we've been having a dispute concerning several things wrong with our place, and he either refuses to do anything or says he'll do something and then is too lazy or greedy to follow through. Last January, a new dispute began. Nearly annually, we've had a maintenance guy come over to perform maintenance on the heating unit. This was a major nuisance to us because without prior warning, there would be a guy at our door calling my husband, and either him or me had to drop whatever we were doing and come home so the maintenance can be done. Later we found out this was because the company the maintenance guy works for would call the landlord to make an appointment, and the landlord would just pick the first possible option instead of coordinating the date with us, but I digress. The real trouble started when we got the bill for the maintenance. In our country, the landlord and tenant have to have agreements on who pays for what. Our landlord didn't talk to us about this, didn't mention anything or whatever. He just gave the maintenance company our info and they sent us the bill. This didn't sit right with me at all, but my husband didn't want any trouble with anyone, so he paid the bill, which wasn't small. Unfortunately, due to difficult personal circumstances, this happened thrice in total. The third time was last January. My husband paid the bill again, but I decided enough is enough. I started messaging the landlord asking to pay us back for all of the bills. I also spoke to a lawyer. All in all, she said it's unlawful that he has no agreements with us and still makes us pay the bill. In the meantime, the landlord came to my husband's workplace during work hours to talk. In other words, he came to rant and yell at my husband. In his unhinged ranting and yelling, which my brilliant husband recorded, the landlord said that if a lawyer says so, then he'll pay us back. Ask and you shall receive, Mr. Landlord. I contacted the lawyer again. She sent him a demand letter and gave him a week to pay us back. Did he pay back? Of course not. After weeks of back and forth over email and me calling him out on lies and inconsistencies, and at this point demanding payment, last week he tells me that he has no obligation to pay us back because my husband signed a contract with the aforementioned maintenance company. He also said we can ask them to send us that contract. Husband and I talked about this and came to the conclusion that it's unlikely, as neither of us remembers any contract, let alone have a copy. The next day, my husband calls the company to ask for the contract. Long story short, they told him they don't have any contracts with us personally. They only have a contract with the landlord, which obligates them to perform maintenance on heating units and all of his properties. He should have given us a subcontract that he'd have to make himself, which means the company wouldn't have it anyways. I sent the landlord an email telling him they don't have any contracts with us and once again demanding payment. This was Friday last week. This past Monday, the landlord answered my email. It briefly said, "See the maintenance contract attached." Weird. I opened the attachment. Oh, I see a contract all right. First thing I see is the maintenance company logo. Mind you, a few days earlier, that same company told my husband they don't have any contracts with him. Second thing I see is the opening paragraph of the contract being addressed directly to my husband. I scroll down to the last page and I thought, nah, that's not how husband's name writes. There was a written date and signature. The handwriting was obviously not my husband's, and the signature looked to me to be similar to his, but not his. I thought it looked very awkward. It didn't have the same flow my husband's handwriting has, if that makes sense. At the time, I wasn't 100% sure though. When my husband came home from work, I showed him the contract. He immediately said it's not his signature. He grabbed some other documents he signed before to compare. He wrote down his signature on a blank piece of paper to show me how he signs. Clear as day, the signature was forged. Then we looked closer at the contract. We could see that the opening paragraph that addressed my husband personally was in a slightly different font than the rest. Then it occurred to us that this contract only applies for only one particular year, 2023. Okay, so if this contract is only valid in 2023, and when signed by the customer, the company is obligated to perform maintenance within that same year, then why did no one perform any maintenance on our heating unit in 2023? Spoiler, because this contract is fake, that's why. We were dumbstruck, furious, and frankly tired of this BS. We started Googling what to do in this situation. Most consistent answer we found was to file an official police report. The police will investigate and take necessary measures. So we called the police. We have an appointment tomorrow. I'm going to bed now. Tiny update. We spoke to the police, filed a report, and we have to wait for now. I hope to hear from the police next week. My husband told me the landlord came by at his job during work hours. Again. He wanted to make an appointment with us to talk about the issues going on at our place, unrelated to the story. What is related to this story is that he tried really hard to convince, or should I say gaslight my husband, that the contract is legit, and that he did sign it back in 2023. A little piece of context I haven't mentioned before is that we've been living here since 2021. If there was a contract, it would make way more sense if my husband signed it then, not 2 years later. Another mini update. Got a message from the police. They began the investigation today. It's crazy that some people like this will go to such lengths to try to fool other people just to save a few bucks. It seems at this point it's in the hands of the investigators now, and OP just has to wait for charges to be made. And given how the faked document and the forged signature just wasn't very well done, it seems like this wasn't a very well thought out crime. So I'm pretty confident the police should be able to solve this pretty easily and hit him with some charges. Anyway, I'll be keeping an eye out when and if there are any updates on this, and add it to a future video if there is. Guy tried to break into my car while I was sitting in it. About 7 years ago, I was 20 years old, going to college and trying to make a little extra money. I picked up a job working in Flint, Michigan as a live-in caregiver for a 98-year-old woman named Lillian, who had Alzheimer's. Honestly, I wasn't trained the way I should have been to properly care for her. I did a lot of research and tried my best to learn everything I could to make the situation as comfortable as possible for her. Needless to say though, I did get frustrated sometimes. One of those times was a hot summer night, probably around 2 a.m., when I awoke to her screaming from her bedroom. I ran to her to find her sitting in her laundry basket. After helping her up, I noticed that she had wet herself. I took her to the bathroom to get her cleaned up. She told me she thought that the laundry basket was the toilet, and after she sat down in it, she couldn't get out. I felt so sorry for her. I tried my best to reassure her that it would be okay. I told her I would clean everything up, run her laundry again, and stay up the rest of the night, just in case she needed anything. Once she fell back asleep, I threw her laundry in and decided I had time to sneak out for a quick cigarette. Yes, I am one of those nasty, horrible smokers. I decided to sit in my car to use the air conditioning to stay cool, and call my best friend to see if she was still up so I could vent a little. Also, I just wanted to talk to someone as it was late at night and I was alone in my car. Being female, we're wired to be nervous about being alone at night, unfortunately. I hadn't been on the phone for more than 2 minutes when I got a weird feeling. Something was telling me to look over my left shoulder. When I did, I saw a younger guy, maybe late teens, early 20s, walking down the sidewalk in my direction with a sweatshirt on. His hood was up. Now remember, this is the middle of summer, so immediately I felt as though something was off. But who am I to say this guy isn't cold? One of my flaws is being too afraid to hurt people's feelings, even when the situation calls for it. I knew in that moment that I needed to lock my doors, but I didn't want this guy to hear the sound of my doors locking and feel like I thought he was a criminal just for walking down the sidewalk. My body is screaming warning signs at me. The hair on the back of my neck was standing up. It felt hard to breathe. I knew my friend was still talking, but I couldn't really hear a word she said. I was afraid to turn my head to see where he was. I was frozen. Suddenly, my friend's voice became clear to me. She was yelling at me. "Hey, why aren't you answering me? What's going on?" I turned my head to the right, just in time to see him reaching for my passenger door handle. Without even having time to think, I somehow managed to reach up with my left hand and hit the lock button for the doors, just as he started pulling at the handle. His right hand was in the front pocket of his sweatshirt. He seemed to have been holding on to something, and with his other hand, he was pulling at my handle with such force that the entire car was jerking back and forth. I didn't move. I didn't scream. I just watched him. I remember his eyes staring into mine. He looked angry. Just as I start to think, this is it. He's going to get in somehow. He's going to kill or hurt me. He suddenly stops. He stood there for a quick second and then turned and ran away. In that moment, I burst into tears. I was scared, angry, and confused. What just happened? What was he trying to do? Kill me? Steal my car? Is he going to come back? Lastly, even though I was happy about it, why did he suddenly stop and run away like that? I called 911. The dispatcher asked me if there was any way for me to leave the area. I wanted to, but then I realized, Lillian. I needed to get back in that house, but I was terrified to step foot out of my car. I took a few deep breaths and decided I didn't have time to think about it. I needed to make sure she was okay. I got back in the house and immediately went to her room. She was sound asleep. I felt a huge sense of relief. I took a walk through the house and checked all the doors and windows to make sure we were safe. Everything was secure. I sat on the couch in the living room in the dark and waited for the cops to come. For those of you who don't know much about Flint, this type of call is not their top priority. It took them over 4 hours to respond. At that point, obviously there is nothing they can do. He was long gone. I still think about that night more often than I would like to admit. The what-ifs are the hardest part. All I know is I hope to never be in a situation like that again. Old school know-it-all got schooled with blueprints and facts. Back when I was still new to the construction field, I was the only woman on site and fresh out of college. I was there to oversee structural integrity inspections for a new commercial build, basically making sure nothing would come crashing down once the project was done. There was this older guy on the team named Rick. He clearly didn't like taking instructions from someone younger, let alone a woman. Every day he'd make subtle digs calling me princess, rolling his eyes when I gave directions, and once even loudly joked to the crew that I probably got my degree from Pinterest. I kept my cool for weeks, did my job, and made sure every single note I logged was tight and accurate. Then came the foundation pour. Rick was supposed to handle it, but he made a huge error in the rebar placement. Major safety concern. I double-checked the specs, took photos, and called it out during the inspection walk. Rick tried to argue in front of everyone, saying, "I've been doing this longer than she's been alive. She's wrong." So I calmly pulled out the blueprints, my inspection notes, and the regulation binder, and walked everyone through the exact point of failure. The foreman looked at Rick and said, "She's right. You could have cost us a lawsuit." The look on Rick's face, priceless. He didn't say a word the rest of the day, and from that moment on, he never questioned me again. Anyway, friends, that's going to do it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. If you enjoyed, be sure to hit that like button. And also, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more Reddit shenanigans like this. So I'm out of here. Take care, and I'll see you next time.